Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and Mazel Tov. Abe Mezrich is a software marketer and a poet. His book is entitled Between the Mountain and the Land Lies the Lesson. The Torah and the whole of the Hebrew Bible urges us to distinguish, Mezrich suggests, between two fundamentally different ways of being in the world. You can live in cities of Cain, or you can live in cities of Moses. Our parasha ends with the history's first and still most famous manslaughter, if not murder. Cain either advertently or inadvertently kills his brother Abel, and God calls out, "Ei havel achicha, where is your brother Abel?" And Cain answers, "Lo yadati, I don't know." And then famously quips, "Hashomer achi anochi, am I my brother's keeper?" And God calls out in disgust, "Ma asita, what have you done? Kol dimei achicha tzoakim elai, min ha'adama. Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground." This week marks 80 years since the massacre at Baba Yar, the ravine on the edge of the city of Kiev, where 34,000 Jewish men, women, and children were killed in 2 days, September 29th, September 30th, 1941. Victims of other massacres at this site included Soviet prisoners of war and communists, Ukrainian nationalists, and Roma people. It is estimated that between 100,000 and 150,000 souls were killed at Baba Yar, or human lives were cut short at Baba Yar. Their souls live on. And Ukrainians then shrugged their shoulders and echoed Cain's dangerous quip, "Hashomer achi anochi, am I my brother's keeper?" And God on high has been thundering for 80 years now. For 80 years now, God has been thundering, "Ma asita, what have you done?" And God calls out in disgust, "Kol dimei achicha tzoakim elai min ha'adama. Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground." And the Hebrew is dimei achicha, your brother's bloods, plural. The rabbis ask, why plural? Why not just dam, singular blood? And one answer comes to suggest that all the future generations that would have come from those people who were murdered were also killed that day. Last week, the Ukrainian parliament passed a law defining anti-Semitism and criminalizing it. Some of you, like me, may have stories in your family of grandparents or great-grandparents fleeing from the Ukraine. This is a remarkable moment in Jewish history. Let it be noted. Now, in order for this law to be entered into full force, it must be signed by President Vladimir Zelensky, who himself comes from Jewish lineage and has said that he has lost his own relatives in the Shoah. And this week, our country observed its first National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. At the center of the commemorations across Canada was the public mourning for the children, the innocent children. The 4th volume of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada has estimated the number of unmarked graves at so-called residential schools to be 3,200. However, the entire residential school system, the number identified the number of identifiable children who are documented as having died there while in custody is over 4,100 individuals. Here, in Canada. For 100 years, Canadians have been shrugging shoulders and echoing Cain's dangerous quip, "Hashomer achi anochi," am I my brother's keeper? And God on high thunders for a century now or more, "Ma asita," what have you done? Kol demei achicha tzoakim elai, min ha'adama. God calls out in disgust, "Your brother's bloods cry out to me from the ground." Last Sunday, we at Holy Blossom welcomed Indigenous leaders and educators, musicians and dancers, community organizers and advocates to join us in a very moving exchange of storytelling and traditions. And I learned a lot that day, this week, this year, and I have so much more to learn. If you haven't yet devoted some time this week to studying the 94 calls to action, I urge you, please. They are readily available online. Consider how you might personally respond to these calls through your volunteer work, through your professional life. This is the only way we know how to begin to honor the memories of the thousands of innocent Indigenous children who rest in nameless graves. May God watch over and protect them. This week, Jewish settlers in the West Bank launched a stone-throwing assault on a Palestinian village in South Hebron Hills. More than a dozen people were severely wounded, including a 3-year-old boy. The fact that this took place on our holy day, Shmini Atzeret Simchat Torah, is especially offensive. The perpetrators claim to have been motivated by religious fervor, but that is impossible. Their violence was only an act of idolatry. Foreign Minister Yair Lapid has labeled this incident a terror attack. Too often, Israeli Jews shrug their shoulders and echo Cain's dangerous quip, "Hashomer achi anochi," am I my brother's keeper? And God demands, "Ma asita," what have you done? Kol demei achicha tzoakim elai min ha'adama. Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Israel must launch a full investigation immediately to identify and arrest all of the perpetrators, not only some of them, and ensure that they are all brought to justice. So Abe Mizrich, the poet and the software expert, teaches that Moses takes a very different approach to Cain. You recall, Moses also killed a man, the Egyptian taskmaster, who was brutally beating a Hebrew slave. We don't know if that death was intentional or unintentional. The text is vague. But eventually, Moses becomes the great lawgiver at Sinai. The very person who once struck down a man dead in defense of another man's life eventually takes responsibility and establishes a book of law which we treasure to this day. Moses gave that law book to the world, and it is what shapes most of today's legal systems to this very day. It could be, Mezrich suggests, that Deuteronomy 21 is a direct response to the story of Cain at the beginning of Genesis. As the children of Israel prepare to enter into the land of Israel, Moses readies them for the great responsibility that comes with sovereignty in the land, for the great responsibility that comes with power. A particular case of violence is brought forward. Should someone be murdered and his body abandoned in a field, and the identity of the killer is unknown, the people must collectively take responsibility for the bloodshed by performing a collective, very complex and intricate and very bloody ceremony. Here's what is written in Deuteronomy 21. We don't often read it aloud. Your elders and magistrates shall go out and measure the distances from the corpse to the cities nearby. The elders of the city nearest to the corpse shall then take a heifer, which has never been worked in its lifetime, which has never pulled a yoke. And the elders of the city shall then bring the heifer down to an ever-flowing wadi, which has never been tilled or sown. And there in the wadi, in the dry valley, they shall break the neck of the heifer. The priests, the sons of Levi, shall come forward, for the Eternal your God has chosen them to minister to God and to pronounce blessings in the name of the Eternal God. And every lawsuit and every case of assault is subject to their ruling then and there. All the elders of the town nearest to the corpse shall wash their hands over the heifer whose neck was broken in the wadi, and they shall make this following declaration: Our hands did not shed this blood, nor did our eyes see it done. So please, God, absolve your people Israel, whom you redeemed, and do not let guilt for the blood of the innocent remain among your people Israel. And they will be absolved of the blood guilt. What is the meaning of this dramatic and rather gory ceremony? Mezrich suggests it is a rejection of the worldview of Cain. Moses tells his followers to do precisely the opposite of Cain. Exit the city, go out into the field, go to the scene of the crime and see with your own eyes the spilled blood on the ground. Moses doesn't want his descendants, doesn't want us to be like Cain in a state of perpetual denial. Moses wants us to accept responsibility because they were, as we are, our brother's keepers. I know many Jews of Canada say, we weren't there. We didn't see it, we didn't hear it. My ancestors were still in the Ukraine back then. We don't belong to those churches. How can we apologize for something we were not a part of? And yet our Torah teaches us that it is a dangerous world. And Heschel teaches us that only some are guilty, but all are responsible. And so we cannot turn a blind eye in this dangerous world. The ritual holds the city elders responsible, accountable for the crime, because God forbid somehow they allowed a culture of negligence to flourish under their watch. Cain may have asked, am I my brother's keeper? But in Moses' world, in the Torah that we have been entrusted with as a sacred inheritance, that question is an affront to God. Even daring to ask, am I my brother's keeper, is a chilul Hashem, an offense to God on high. God warned Cain about all of this, and Cain couldn't hear the warning. God said, if you do what is right, shall it not be lifted up? And if you do what is not right, sin couches at the door. And unto you is its desire, but you can be its master. God teaches that the basest and cruelest human instincts never go away. Our only choice is to become its master. To master that beast, Mezrich insists, you must look into the private and dark corners of your soul to get the strength to fling the doors open wide, to go out into the field, to witness, to testify, to listen, to learn, and to see. The infrastructure of the city of Cain is identical to that of the city of Moses. Only the morality we bring has the ultimate sway in deciding what sort of city we will inhabit, what kind of country we will build, what kind of world we will create. Elie Wiesel says the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is indifference. And so Torah commands, you shall not stand idly by while your neighbor bleeds. And in the creation story, every tree, every plant is described Leminehu. It produced of its kind, each species uniquely. And the same with the animals, Leminehu. Each kind perpetuated its own. But there is only one Adam. There is only one human being. And it never says of that human being, Leminehu, of its type, because there is only one type of human being, only one humanity. The city of Cain is a moral tragedy. The city of Moses is a transformational possibility. To leave the city of Cain behind and to move into the city of Moses, we need to be ready to do something that is perhaps harder than merely tinkering with the hinges on the doors or greasing the doorknobs. We need instead to be willing to unlock those doors, to fling them open wide, to walk outside, and finally encounter our brothers, our sisters, our siblings, by finally facing ourselves. Ken Yehi Ratzon.